Welcome back to Inside the Philippines Journals. Now, if you've been with this channel a while, you'll know most of the people who sit down and tell us their story are men. Fellas who came out here chasing a second act and found something they weren't expecting. Today's a bit different. Today it's a woman's voice. And that's rarer for us. And maybe that's exactly why you ought to hear it. Her name is Maureen. She's 72 years old, from West Yorkshire, up in the north of England. A retired schoolteacher, 30-odd years in the classroom. The kind of woman who spent a lifetime being sensible so other people didn't have to be. She was widowed. Her children had grown and gone, scattered halfway round the world, and the phone in her cold little terraced house had more or less stopped ringing. So she did something a lot of people only ever daydream about. She sold up. The house, the furniture. 40 years of a life. And at an age when most folk are settling deeper into their armchair, she got on a plane, alone, and flew to the other side of the planet. What she found here was warmth. Real warmth. The kind she'd been starving for. But she also found something she hadn't reckoned on, and it took her the best part of 2 years to understand what she was really looking at. She'll tell you herself. She's nobody's fool, and she'll not pretend otherwise. But being nobody's fool and being lonely at 72 are two different things, and out here, they can cost you. Before we get into it, do us a favor. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We've got people all over the world, and it's a lovely thing to see. If you've started over somewhere new, later in life, or you've thought about it, tell us. And if these stories mean something to you, give the video a like and subscribe so the next one finds you. Right. Here's her story, in her own words. I'll tell you the thing nobody says out loud about being a widow at my age. It isn't the grief. You'd think it'd be the grief, and for a while it is. It's everything. But grief burns itself down eventually, like a fire you can't feed. What's left after is worse, in a quieter way. It's the silence. Jeffrey passed in the March. Heart, quick, no fuss, which was very like him. And by the summer I'd learned that a house can be too quiet to sleep in. 41 years married. You get used to another person breathing in a house. You don't even notice you've got used to it until it's gone. We were near Halifax, in West Yorkshire, if you know it. Stone terrace, 2 up, 2 down, the sort of street where the hills come right down to the end of the road, and the wind finds every gap in the windows. I taught primary school for 32 years. Reading, mostly, and the little ones, 4- and 5-year-olds, learning their letters. I was good at it. I'll say that plainly because it's true, and I'm past the age of false modesty. I could take a frightened child who thought he was stupid and have him reading inside a term. That was my whole working life. Being needed by small people who needed a great deal. And then you retire, and the school gives you a card and a voucher for a garden center. And it all just stops. Our Andrew's in London. He's something in insurance. Does very well. 3 children I see twice a year if I'm lucky. And Karen, that's my daughter. Karen went out to Perth, in Australia. Near 20 years ago now, married an Australian. And I'll not pretend that didn't sting at the time. They ring. They do ring. But you can hear it in their voices, can't you? When a phone call is a duty. You all right, Mum? Good. Good. Well. And there's the pips. And there's the quiet again. Jeffrey was a joiner, worked with his hands his whole life, and he wasn't a talker. But a house with him in it had a weight to it, a settledness. He'd be out in that drafty little garage of an evening, sanding something, whistling tunelessly, and I'd hear it through the wall and not even know I was listening to it until it wasn't there anymore. That's what I mean about the silence. It's not the absence of noise. It's the absence of the other person's ordinary racket, the kettle they'd put on, the news they'd shout at, the way they'd say, "You all right, love," without wanting an answer, just to send a thread across the room to you. You don't miss the conversations. You miss the noise of not being alone. I was 70 years old, sitting in that cold house, and I did the sums one night the way I used to do the register. I worked out I'd gone 11 days without a single human being touching me. Not a handshake, not a hand on the arm. 11 days. And I thought, Maureen, you can sit here and let this house have you. Or you can do summit daft. I want to be honest about my children, too, because it's easy to make them sound cold, and they weren't, not really. They had their lives, and I'd raised them to have their lives, which is the cruel joke of good parenting. You spend 20 years making them independent, and then you're wounded when they are. Andrew's a busy man, with a busy wife and 3 children in a good school, and a mortgage the size of a small country. Karen's 12,000 miles away, in a country where it's tomorrow already. Neither of them was neglecting me on purpose. They just each assumed the other one had it in hand, the way siblings do, and between the two of them, nobody had it in hand, and their mother sat in Halifax counting the days. The Philippines came to me by accident, more or less. There was a documentary, one of those Sunday night things, about British pensioners who'd upped and moved abroad. Most of them had gone to Spain, which never appealed, full of people just like me, moaning about the same things in the sun. But there was one segment, a woman my sort of age, living in a little town in the Philippines, and she was laughing. Properly laughing, in a market, surrounded by people. And the narrator said something about how they call it the land of the gentle people, and how nobody there thinks you disappear at 65. I couldn't get it out of my head. That's the honest truth of it. I looked it up. I read for months, the visas, the money, the heat, all of it. I'm a teacher. I do my homework. I'm not one of these people who books a flight on a whim. And the more I read, the more it seemed possible. My little house, in that market, was worth a frightening amount of money by then. More than I'd ever have believed. Sell that, I thought, and you could live like a duchess somewhere warm, and be near people, and matter to somebody again. My son thought I'd lost my mind. I'll spare you most of that conversation, but the shape of it was him at his end saying, "Mom, be sensible," over and over, as if being sensible was a thing I'd forgotten how to do rather than a thing I'd done every single day for 70 years and was frankly sick to the back teeth of. He talked about the heat, the crime, the tropical diseases, the sort of people who prey on Western women out there. His words, and there was a horrible little seed of truth in them that I chose, at the time, to be insulted by rather than to hear. Karen was quieter about it, and quieter is sometimes worse. She just said, "Are you doing this because of Dad?" And I said no, and I put the phone down, and I sat there a long while wondering if she was right, and deciding that, even if she was, so what? Grief's as good a reason as any to change your life. Better than most. I'll tell you the moment I properly decided. I'd been to the doctors, nothing serious, blood pressure, and I sat in that waiting room in Halifax, gray carpet, gray light, a fish tank with one tired fish in it, and it was full of people my age, all of us waiting. All of us with that patient folded hands look of people who've stopped expecting anything new to happen to them ever again. And I thought, that's the queue, Maureen. That's the queue you're in now. And it only goes one way. and you'll shuffle up it politely for 15 or 20 years, being no trouble to anybody. And then it'll be your turn. And something in me just stood up and walked out of that queue. That's the closest I can get to explaining it. But I sold it. The whole lot. The house went for a great deal more than Jeffrey and I paid for it, and after everything was settled, I had somewhere near £165,000 sitting in a bank account, which for a schoolteacher from Halifax is a fortune I never in my life expected to hold. That, and my state pension, about £880 a month, which out there is real money. I sold the furniture, the bed we'd shared. I kept 2 suitcases and a box of photographs. And at 70 years old, with my heart going like a drum, I flew to a town I'd never seen, in a country I'd never set foot in, to start again. I want to be clear about something before I go on, because it matters. I didn't go out there to find a man. I want that understood. I went to find life. What happened with the men, with one man and his family, that came later, and it came in through a door I didn't know I'd left open. Loneliness. That was the open door. And someone always finds the open door. The town was Dumaguete, on the island of Negros, in the middle of the country. The Visayas, they call that region. A university town, Silliman University, right in the heart of it, so there's students everywhere and a bit of life to the place. They call it the City of Gentle People, and I remember reading that on the drive in from the airport and thinking, well, we'll see, love. I've heard that sort of thing before. But do you know it was true, or true enough? That first fortnight nearly broke me open with the shock of it. The heat first, my word, the heat. You step off the plane, and it's like walking into someone's breath. And the noise, the tricycles, these little motorbikes with a sidecar bolted on, hundreds of them, all buzzing about like angry wasps, and everyone leaning on the horn but not angry, just saying hello with it, more or less. Roosters at 4 in the morning, karaoke from 3 different houses at once, all murdering the same love songs. It should have been unbearable. I found I loved it. After that silence in Halifax, all that living noise felt like being let out of somewhere. I'd arranged a place before I came, a little apartment in Piapi, which is the district up near the sea, walking distance from the boulevard. Rizal Boulevard, they call it, this seafront, where the whole town comes out in the evening when it cools, to walk and eat and sit on the wall and watch the water. Families, students, old men playing chess, children selling little bags of balut, which I never could bring myself to try. I'd get a coffee and a slice of that Sylvanas cake from Sans Rival, a frozen thing, cashew and buttercream. I could have eaten it till I burst. And I'd sit and just watch people be near each other. Cost me next to nothing. 25,000 pesos a month for the apartment, which is around £350, for a 2-bedroom place with a balcony you could see a strip of sea from. In Halifax, that wouldn't have got me a garage. The first few weeks, I did nothing but learn the town, which for a retired schoolteacher is a kind of heaven. I do like to learn a place properly. I found where the good market was, the one behind the cathedral, where you buy fish still flapping and mangoes by the kilo, and the vendors shout you their prices and then knock a bit off because you're a Lola, and it's good manners. I found Robinson's, the mall, air-conditioned as a fridge, where the whole town goes on a hot afternoon just to be cool, and I'd walk it slow with the students and the families. I found the little Pinitan place where they do bud, a sticky rice thing wrapped in a leaf, with thick hot chocolate, chocolate, that they make from proper local cacao. And I'd walk out along Rizal Boulevard every evening as the sun went, past the acacia trees and the old Spanish-looking buildings of Silliman University, past the students revising on the sea wall and the old men at their chests, and I felt, for the first time in years, like I was walking through a life instead of past one. I want to say the thing about being seen again, because it's the hinge the whole story turns on. In England, I'd gone invisible, the way women do at my age, faded right out of the picture. In Dumaguete, an old woman is somebody. Children waved at me. A tricycle driver learned my name and would toot and grin. That woman at the market started keeping the best mangoes back under her stall for me after a fortnight. Wouldn't sell them to anyone else. I hadn't felt so noticed, so gently included in 10 years. And if you've never been lonely, you'll not understand what that does to a person. It's like being cold so long you've forgotten you're cold. And then somebody puts a blanket on you, and only then do you start to shiver. Because only then do you feel how frozen you'd been. And it had names, that gentleness, which is the thing that got under my skin. They call you ma'am, or nane, which means mother, or Lola, which is grandmother. And they say it warmly, not as a way of putting you on a shelf, but as a way of pulling you in. In England, the words for an old woman are all little knives. Sweetheart, love, from a nurse who's decided you're simple now. Out there, the words made me somebody's, part of something, a Lola, in a place full of grandchildren. I'm telling you this so you understand how it worked on me. Because if you only see the ending, you'll think I was a foolish old woman. And I was. But not in the way you think. The foolishness wasn't stupidity. It was thirst. Ricky came into it through a broken tap. That's the daft, ordinary truth of it. The kitchen tap in the apartment had started leaking, a proper drip that kept me up. And the landlady, a lovely woman, Mrs. Tan, ran a hardware business, said she'd send her nephew's friend round to see to it. A good boy, very honest, does odd jobs and drives a bit. And round he came, on a hobble-hobble, which is a motorbike they use as a taxi, and he fixed my tap in 10 minutes flat and wouldn't take more than a few pesos for it. He was 37 at the time. I want to put that in front of you now, straight, because I've had enough of these stories where the woman hides the arithmetic and lets you find it out later like it's a shameful secret. He was 37, and I was 70. There's 33 years in that. I'm not a stupid woman, and I was never once under the illusion that a handsome young man of 37 had gone weak at the knees over a 70-year-old widow from Halifax. Give over. I knew what I looked like. I wasn't buying romance off the shelf. But you can know a thing with your head and still be worked on somewhere lower down. And that's the part one didn't understand yet. He was, how do I put it? He was easy to be around. That's the best I can do. He had this wide open face and a way of laughing at himself, and he called me Nay Maureen, nay short for Nane, mother, and he'd fix things and then sit and drink a Coke with me on the balcony and tell me about his family out in Valencia, up in the hills where it's cooler, and ask me about England like it was the far side of the moon. He'd never once been on an aeroplane. He'd barely left the island. Within a month, he was driving me everywhere. I'd ring him, and he'd come on the Habal Habal, or later in a friend's little car, and take me to Robinson's, that's the mall, or to the market, or out to Valencia where the air's sweet, and there's a waterfall you can sit under, the Casaroro I think it was, a great cold ribbon of water coming down through the green. He took me out to Darwin once, down the coast, where the divers go, and we sat on the black sand and ate grilled fish with our fingers off a banana leaf. And he told me about his father, who'd been a fisherman and drowned in a bad season when Ricky was 14, which was when the being the man of the house started for him at 14. And something in me, the teacher, the mother, softened right through at that. a boy of 14 carrying a family. I paid him, of course, for all of it. Proper money, more than the going rate, because I could, and because he was worth it to me. 500 pesos here, 1,000 there, 7 pounds, 14 pounds. Nothing to me, real money to him. And he never once asked for a peso more than we'd agreed. I noticed that. I noticed it particularly because I'd been warned before I came about exactly the opposite. Andrew's sort of people who prey on Western women ringing in my ears. And here was a young man who'd hand me back my change to the last coin and be offended if I told him to keep it. That's how they get you, mind. Not the ones who grab, the ones who won't take. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll tell you the moment I knew I was in trouble, though I didn't call it trouble then. I called it happiness. It was my birthday, my 71st, and I hadn't told a soul, because who was there to tell? Andrew had texted, "Happy birthday, Mum X," at 9:30 at night his time, which is nearly bedtime mine, and I'd resigned myself to a quiet one. And Ricky turned up at the door, unasked, with a little cake from a bakery, and his younger sister and 2 cousins, and they sang to me this daft happy birthday in the doorway, and the sister had made me a card, a handmade card, with my name spelled wrong on it, Morin, and I stood there, 71 years old, in a doorway in the Philippines, and cried like a child in front of these people I'd known 5 weeks, because nobody in England had made me a card in 15 years. Now, you tell me, when somebody does that, when a person crosses your loneliness like that, what price would you not pay to keep it? That's not a rhetorical question. That's the whole story, really. Everything after is just the working out of it. His mother was called Elena, Nanay Elena, everyone called her. A small, tough woman of about 60, though she looked older, the way work ages people out there. The family were in Valencia, up in the hills. Ricky, his mother, a younger sister called Rosalie, who they all called Girlie, and a rotating cast of cousins and aunties I never fully got the map of. The father had died years back. There was another brother working construction in Cebu who sent money when he could, which wasn't often. Ricky was the one at home, the dependable one, the one who held it together. The first money that wasn't wages, I remember it exactly. Nanay Elena had the sugar, the diabetes, and the high blood, and her medicines were costing about 3,000 pesos a month she couldn't reliably find. 40 pounds, near enough. Ricky didn't ask me. That's important. His mother had a turn one afternoon when I was out at their place for lunch. A proper spread they'd put on. More food than they could afford, which I only understood later. And I saw the state of her, and I saw the near-empty blister packs on the shelf. And I asked. I insisted. I pressed the money into Girlie's hand and wouldn't hear no. 3,000 pesos. And the relief on that old woman's face? You'd have done the same. Anyone with a heart would have done the same. And that's how it starts. Not with a con, with a heart. I want to be fair to them, and to myself, because bitterness is a poison, and I'll not drink it. The Filipino way with family isn't like ours. There's a thing they have, utang na loob, they call it, a debt of gratitude, a web of who owes what to whom, and it binds a family together in a way we've mostly lost in England. Ricky sending money to his mother wasn't him being soft. It was simply what a son was. And when I started giving, when I became, without quite noticing, part of the web, I wasn't being conned so much as adopted. The trouble is that being adopted and being milked can look identical from the inside, and they can even be the same thing at the same time. I didn't understand that yet. I thought love and money were separate rooms. Out there, in that family, they were the same room, and I'd just walked into it. So the medicines became a monthly thing. Of course they did. And then it was rice. The price of rice went up, and I quietly started covering the family's sack, a couple of thousand a month. And then load, which is the credit for their phones, so they could ring me. Small things, each one small. That's the trick of it, and I use the word trick, but I'm honestly still not sure there was a trickster. Each single thing was so small and so reasonable that to refuse, it would have made you a monster. 40 pounds so an old woman can breathe. 20 pounds so a family can eat. Who says no to that? Then came the Sari Sari store. That was the first proper outlay, and the first time I heard myself being managed, though I didn't recognize the sound of it yet. A Sari Sari store is a little shop run out of the front of a house. Sweets, tinned fish, sachets of shampoo and coffee, cigarettes sold one at a time. Nearly every family's got one or wants one, because it's a bit of income that doesn't depend on anybody hiring you. And the idea, put to me one evening on the balcony by Ricky, gentle as anything, was that if Girlie had a proper Sari Sari store, the family wouldn't need my help every month. Do you see the cleverness of it? And I don't even mean it as an accusation. It was framed as a way to stop taking my money, to make them independent, so that I could stop giving. It cost 70,000 pesos to set up right. The shelving, the initial stock, a proper fridge for cold drinks, and the soft drinks, just shy of 1,000 pounds. And I paid it gladly, because it felt like an investment in their standing on their own feet. And because when I handed it over, Nene Elena took my 2 hands in hers and said, in her bit of English, "You are our blessing, Nay. God send you to us." And I believed her. I still think she half meant it. The store did well for a bit, actually. That's the thing people never believe. For a couple of months it did lovely. Girlie ran it well, kept a little exercise book of who owed what. Half the barangay buys on tick, a few pesos here, paid back on payday. And I'd go up and sit behind the counter with her some afternoons, sorting the sachets of coffee and shampoo, weighing out rice, and it took me straight back to the classroom, the smallness and the order of it. The being useful in a plain way. I taught Girlie a bit of proper bookkeeping. She taught me my Bisaya numbers. And I sat on that balcony of an evening feeling like the cleverest, kindest woman in the Visayas. And I thought, Maureen, you've done it. You've built yourself a family. This was the right thing. You should know what a fiesta's like, too, because I was at the heart of it by then, and it's part of how the warmth wraps round you. Every barangay has its yearly due, the Saints' Day, and Valencia's was a proper affair. The whole hillside street strung with lights, everyone in their best, a karaoke machine going till 3 in the morning, and food everywhere. Every house feeding every passing stranger, whether they can afford it or not. Which is the point. The not being able to afford it is the point. It's how they show love. There were aunties I'd never met kissing my cheek and calling me Nay. Little ones I didn't know putting their sticky hands in mine. And I stood in the middle of it, this Yorkshire school teacher, 71 years old, with a plate of pancit in my hand and a paper cup of warm Red Horse beer somebody had pressed on me. And I thought I might burst with the belonging of it. That's not nothing what I bought. I want to keep saying that, because the ledger's coming and it's ugly, but the belonging was real, and I felt it in my chest like sun. It's a peculiar feeling, being adored, I'd not had it in so long I'd forgotten to be wary of it. Somewhere in that second year, the thing between Ricky and me changed shape, and I've thought a great deal about how to describe it honestly, because it's the part that's easiest to make sound either sordid or soft. And it was neither. It was never, I'll say this plainly for the ones who'll assume the worst, it was never a grand romance. I was 71, turning 72. But it became more than a woman and her driver, and pretending otherwise would be a lie. He started staying later. He'd fall asleep on my settee with the fan going, and I'd put a blanket over him. He held my hand crossing the road, which sounds like nothing until you've gone years without a hand. He told me he loved me. Mahal kita. He taught me the words. And I've spent a lot of hours since trying to decide whether he meant it. And the answer I've come to is yes, partly, in his way. Not the way a young man loves a young woman, but there's more than one kind of love, and companionship and gratitude and genuine fondness are real things, even when money's running underneath them like a stream under a field. I knew the age of it was absurd. I did know. I used to catch us in a shop window, this stooped English pensioner and this fit young man. And I'd think, you daft old woman, look at you. But then he'd make me laugh, or he'd carry my bags and scold me for lifting anything, or he'd remember I liked my coffee a particular way, sweet and milky, and have it waiting, and the shop window feeling would go, and I'd just be warm. And warmth is a drug when you've been cold as long as I had. There was one evening I think about more than the rest. We'd been caught out in the rain. The rains there come down like the sky's been split all at once. And we'd sheltered under the awning of a shut-up sari-sari store on the boulevard, just the two of us, watching the water come off the acacia trees in ropes. And he put his jacket round my shoulders, though it was warm as a bath, just to be doing something for me. And he said, out of nowhere, "Nay, when I was a boy, I never think I will have a friend from so far, from the other side of the world." And he said, friend, not anything grander, and that was almost worse, because it was so plainly true and so plainly meant. And I stood there getting soft-headed over a man young enough to be my son, and I knew exactly what I was doing, and I did it anyway. I've never been able to work out whether that makes me less of a fool or more of one. Eyes open. That's the thing I can't shake. My eyes were open the whole time. I just liked what I was looking at too much to look away. I told myself a story to make it bearable. And I'll be honest about the story, because it's how these things work. I told myself that I wasn't buying love. I was making an exchange. My money, which I had too much of, for their warmth, which I had too little of, and that both sides knew the terms, and that this was cleaner and more honest than a lot of English marriages I could name. And there's truth in that. There is. But I dressed it up prettier than it was, because underneath the fair exchange there was a woman who'd have paid anything at all, not to be alone in a doorway again. And a person who'll pay anything is not making an exchange. She's being harvested. And the difference between the two is exactly the difference I couldn't see. And it's the whole reason I'm sitting here telling you this. The money got bigger in that year, and it always came dressed as family, never as us. Girlie, the sister, was clever, genuinely clever, and she'd got a place at a college in Dumaguete to study education. To be a teacher. Well, you can imagine what that did to me. A school teacher myself, no grandchildren I could reach, and here's this bright girl who wants to do the very thing I'd done. The tuition was around 30,000 pesos a semester, with the fees and the books, £400. I paid 2 semesters without blinking. 55,000 pesos over the year, near enough 800 pounds. And I'd have paid 10 times that, because it felt like the best money I'd ever spent. It might even have been. Girlie's still studying. That one I don't regret, whatever else. Then it was the motorbike. Ricky's Habal was a wreck, always breaking, and a decent second-hand motorcycle so he could earn properly was about 95,000 pesos, 1,300 pounds. And the argument was sound. Give a man the means to work, and he's not dependent on you. Again, do you see it? Everything sold to me as the road to them needing me less. Every large sum a step towards my own freedom from the small sums. I bought the motorbike. Of course I bought the motorbike. I'd been out there 14 months by then, and one afternoon I sat with my bank statements. I'm a teacher, I keep records, and I totted it up. And I'd given away, one small reasonable kindness at a time, over 300,000 pesos. More than 4,000 pounds. And I remember the little cold feeling of it, and then I remember how quickly I explained it away. It's a family. Families cost money. In England you'd spend that on Christmas and birthdays and helping the grandchildren over a few years and think nothing of it. I've the money. What's it for, if not this? And that's true. Every word of that's true. That's what makes it so hard to see the shape of the thing while you're inside it. The fiesta was where I first heard someone say it out loud. The barangay fiesta in Valencia. A great do, a whole street of it, a pig roasted, everyone in their best. And I paid for a fair bit of it, the pig especially, a lechon, 7,000 pesos of pig. And I didn't mind. I was chuffed to be part of it. But there was another Englishwoman there, Barbara. Widow, from Kent, been out in Dumaguete 11 years, sharp as a tack and brown as a nut. And she watched me for a while, handing over money, being called Blessing. And near the end of the night, she sat next to me on a plastic chair, and she said, not unkindly, "How long have you been giving, love?" And I told her. And she nodded, slow, and she said, "They're good people, this lot. I mean that. But I want you to hear me. You're not their friend. You're their pension." And she patted my knee and got up and left me with it. And I was furious with her. Absolutely furious. I thought, jealous old cow. I put it right out of my head. I didn't put it out of my head. I've never got it out of my head since. The house was the point I couldn't come back from. And I knew even at the time that it was, and I did it anyway, which is the part one've had to make my peace with. It came up gently, like everything did. The family's place in Valencia was a poor thing. Timber and tin leaked in the rains. The floor was bare earth in one room. And Ricky started talking, wistful, never asking, about how one day he'd love to build his mother a proper concrete house before she passed. Bahay na Bato, a real house that wouldn't blow away in the typhoons. And I lay in bed that night and thought about that old woman on her bare earth floor. And I thought about all my money sitting in a bank doing nothing but keeping me company. And I thought, what am I saving it for? Andrew doesn't need it. Karen doesn't need it. I'll not take it with me. Why not build something real? Something that'll stand after I'm gone. Something with my heart in it? You'll have spotted the problem before I did. I couldn't own it. A foreigner cannot own land in the Philippines. I knew that. I'd read it. It's the first thing you learn. The land was Nanay Elena's, family land, and any house I built on it was hers the moment the concrete set. My name could not go anywhere near the deed. Everyone was very sorry about it, and very clear that it didn't matter, because I was family, and family don't need paper. This is your house also, Nay. Always you have a room here. That's what they said. And I wanted it to be true so badly that I let it be true. The budget was 850,000 pesos, around 12,000 pounds, to build a decent 3-bedroom concrete house with a proper roof and a real kitchen and a toilet that flushed. And I thought, 12,000 pounds out of 165 to give an old woman a home and to make a real thing in the world. That's not madness. That's a good use of a life savings. I still half think that. I signed off on it. The building started. And then it did what building does. It grew. The price of cement had gone up. The land needed more filling than they'd thought. A whole truckload of it, then another. The original plan wouldn't pass the barangay without a proper septic tank. Then the septic tank needed a deeper hole than expected because of the rock. A cousin I'd never met, turned out to be the foreman, on wages, and there were always more workers than last time, and every one of them had to be fed a hot dinner on site. And the rains came in July and spoiled a whole delivery of hollow blocks that had gone soft and had to be bought again. Every single reason was a real reason. That's what I want you to understand. I've built nothing in my life. I taught reading, and every one of these things sounded exactly like the sort of thing that would genuinely happen when you build a house. Because it was. I had no way to tell an honest overrun from a padded one, and I suspect, looking back, that it was a bit of both, all mixed together till you couldn't separate them, which is the story of the whole 2 years, if I'm honest. And every fortnight I sent more, on GCash, on my phone, tap, 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 20,000 here, 35,000 there, from my English bank into an account in Dumaguete. And it never felt like a decision. That was the horror of it. It felt like paying a bill for a thing already half done that couldn't be left half done. The 850,000 became $1 million. The million became 1.2. And by the time there was a roof on it and tiles on the floor, I'd put in near enough 1,400,000 pesos, close to 20,000 pounds, nearly double what we'd started with. I remember standing in it when it was near finished, and it was a lovely house, I'll say that. A proper concrete house with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen and a toilet that flushed and big windows to catch the hill breeze. And feeling proud and sick in the same breath, proud of the thing and sick at the sum, and not letting myself feel the sick part too long because what was the use? It was in the middle of all that the hospital happened, and I'll tell it because it's the truest thing in the whole story, and the one I'd change nothing about. Nanay Elena's gallbladder went badly in the night. She'd been ignoring the pain for weeks, the way poor people do, hoping it'd pass, because a doctor costs money. And by the time they got her down to the hospital in Dumaguete, she was yellow and half out of her mind with it, and they said it had to come out that night or she'd not see morning. And in the Philippines, I learned that night, they don't touch you till someone's paid. There's no arguing, no, we'll sort the bill later. A nurse stood at a little window with a form and a total, and the total was a deposit of 80,000 pesos just to begin, and more to follow. And the whole family stood in that corridor with their pockets turned out and nothing in them, and everyone looked at me. Not cruelly, not even asking, quite. They just looked, because of course they looked, because I was the one who could, and an old woman was dying behind a curtain. I paid it. All of it, in the end, near 120,000 pesos, around 1,600 pounds, for the operation and the 4 days after. And I'd pay it again this minute. There was nothing false in that corridor. I sat up all that night with Gurley, the two of us on plastic chairs under a strip light that buzzed, drinking terrible machine coffee, and when the old woman came round and was going to live, the way she reached for my hand, the way she said, "Salamat, Salamat, nay," over and over. Thank you. Thank you. There was not one calculated atom in it. I'm certain of that. As certain as I am of anything. And here's the cruelty of the whole business. The thing that makes it impossible to be cleanly angry. The love was real, and the milking was real, and they ran down the very same channel. And the night I saved that woman's life for £1,600 was the same season they were quietly costing me $20,000 on a house I could never own. Both true. Always both true. You cannot cut them apart. God knows I've tried. That was the fortnight the first proper crack showed. I'd gone up to Valencia unannounced. I never went unannounced, and I'm still not sure why I did that day. And there were people living in the new house. Not Nanay Elena. A whole other family, the cousin's family, moved into 2 of the 3 rooms, washing on the line, a baby in a hammock. My house. The house with my heart in it, and my £20,000 in the walls. And when I asked Ricky about it, careful, not wanting a scene, he was so easy about it, so unbothered. Of course they're staying, nay, they'd nowhere to go, it's family. That I understood, in a cold flash on that hillside, that family was a word that would always, always have room in it for one more mouth. And that mouth would always, in the end, be fed by me. And still, even then. I told myself I'd misread it, but something had gone quiet in me. I stopped tapping the phone quite so fast, and that's when the boat came up. The boat was 250,000 pesos, £3,500, a proper motorized banca, a fishing boat, so that Ricky and the never-ending cousins could go into the fishing business and, you'll know the tune by now, never need my help again. Independence. Always independence. Always one more big thing that would end all the small things. I'd heard that song enough times to know all the words. 2 things happened close together that autumn, and between them, they finished it. The first was Barbara. I'd been avoiding her since the fiesta, but Dumaguete's a small town, and she cornered me at the Pinitan, over Bud and hot chocolate. And this time, I let her talk, because the boat was sitting on my chest, and I couldn't breathe past it. And she didn't gloat. She was gentle, which was worse. She told me her own version. A man, years back, a house she'd paid for, a family she'd loved, and how it had taken her 8 years and most of her savings to understand that she'd never once been asked whether she wanted any of it. She'd only ever been told what the family needed and left to feel like a monster if she said no. "They're not villains, Maureen," she said. "That's what nobody tells you. It'd be easier if they were villains. They're just poor, and you're just rich and lonely, and the rest follows like water downhill. The love's even real. It's just not the only thing that's real." And she looked at me over her cup and said, "Don't buy the boat, love." The second thing was worse, because it came in his own voice. I'd learned a fair bit of Bisaya by then, Cebuano, the language they speak down there. Not fluent, but I had my ears open more than they knew, because that's a teacher for you. We're always listening. I was on the balcony one evening, and Ricky was down on the step below, on his phone, talking to his mother, and he didn't know how much I'd picked up. And I heard him say, I'll not do the accent, but the sense of it was, he was tired, and the mother was pushing about the boat, pushing hard. and he said something like, "Don't worry, she'll give it. Just don't rush her. She always gives in the end. I know how to talk to her. Kabalo ko unsaon siya. I know how to handle her." And then, softer, almost sad, he said the thing that stayed with me. He said, more or less, "She's a good woman. I don't want her to feel it." I sat very still on that balcony, and I want you to understand, it wasn't the fury I'd have felt at 40. It was almost relief. Because both things were in that one sentence, weren't they? She always gives in the end. I know how to handle her. That's the resource talking. And she's a good woman. I don't want her to feel it. That's something else. Something that wasn't nothing. He wasn't a monster twirling his mustache. He was a poor man who was fond of an old woman and was also, at his mother's push, managing that old woman like a crop. Both at once. The same room. Love and money. The same room, exactly as I'd feared and refused to see. I didn't storm down the steps. I'm 72. I've buried a husband and taught 1,000 children. I was past storming. I let him finish his call. And the next day, I sat him down at my kitchen table. The leaky tap, long since fixed by his own hands. And I told him, in plain words, that I'd heard him. Not to shame him, just so it was true between us. He didn't deny it, and he didn't go cold. That's the part that undid me. He cried. Real tears, his face in his hands, and he said his mother never stopped, and the brother in Cebu sent nothing, and he was so tired of being the one, and yes, he had said those things, and yes, he'd taken more than he should, and no, he'd never lied about being fond of me. That was true. That was the truest thing he had. And I sat there, and I believed all of it, the ugly bits and the good bits, because I'd stopped needing it to be simple. I added it all up that week, the way I add everything up. The medicines, the rice, the load, the store, the tuition, the motorbike, the fiestas, the emergency when Nanay Elena's gallbladder went, and I paid the 120,000 pesos for the hospital without a second's thought. 1,600 pounds, and I'd do it again. She'd have died else. And the house, all of it. It came to the best part of 2 million pesos. Call it 27,000 pounds, given away in under 2 years, out of 165. So, I want to be honest, because this channel's no good if we're not honest. It didn't ruin me. I wasn't left destitute in a foreign country the way some poor souls are. I had the great luck of having had a great deal, so that losing a chunk of it was a wound and not a death. Plenty aren't so lucky. I know that. I count it. I didn't buy the boat. That's the small, hard thing I did, and it doesn't sound like much, but it was the hardest thing I'd done since I got on the plane. I said no. The first real no of the whole 2 years. And the sky didn't fall. There was a bad few weeks. Nanay Elena went cold on me, and there were phone calls, and a great deal of talk about family and God's plan, and how disappointed everyone was, all the levers they knew how to pull. And I let it be uncomfortable. That's the trick they never expect from you, that you'll simply sit in the discomfort and not reach for your phone to make it go away. I'd spent my whole life keeping the peace by giving people what they wanted. I stopped. Here's where I am now, and it's not the ending you'd write for a fairy tale, or a warning, which is, I suppose, why it's the truth. I'm still in Dumaguete. I moved to a smaller place, out in Bakung a bit, quieter, cheaper. And I did it partly to draw a line, a bit of distance, a bit of dignity. I've still got my pension coming in, and I've still got the great bulk of my savings, well over 130,000 pounds of it, because I stopped the bleeding before it emptied me, which is more than a lot of poor devils out here can say. I go to the boulevard of an evening. The woman still keeps me the good mangoes. Barbara and I are proper friends now, thick as thieves, two old English widows who've each paid our tuition to the same university, if you like. We have our chocolate at the Pineton on a Thursday, and we watch the newer arrivals, the fresh-off-the-plane ones with that shine in their eyes, and we don't say anything, because you can't tell them. Nobody could have told me. You have to learn it with your own money. That's the tuition. I did tell my children, in the end. Some of it. Not the sums. A mother has her pride. Andrew went very quiet, and then said, "I did warn you, Mum," which I let him have, because he had, and because there's a particular flavor of loneliness in a son being right about you. But then a funny thing happened. He started ringing more. Properly ringing, not the duty calls. I think it frightened him, the thought of me out here having a whole life he knew nothing about, and frights a cousin of love if you squint. Karen just cried a bit down the phone from Perth and said, "Oh, Mum." And we were closer after that than we'd been in years. So there's that. There's a joke in it somewhere. I had to fly to the far side of the world and give away 20-odd thousand pounds to get my own children to ring me. But I'll take it. You take what warmth you can get. That was always my whole trouble. And it's not the worst trouble a person can have. And Ricky, this is the part people find hardest to swallow. Ricky's still in my life. Not as before. I pay him honest wages for honest work. And he still fixes my taps and drives me about. And we've an understanding now that's cleaner than what we had when I was pouring money into a hole and calling it love. He knows, I know. There's no more managing, because there's nothing left to manage. I give what I choose to give, when I choose, and not a peso to a scheme. Girlie's nearly qualified. I still help with that, freely, eyes open. That one was always real. Do I feel like a fool? Sometimes at 3 in the morning, aye. But mostly, no. Because I asked myself the honest question, would I rather have kept every penny and stayed in that silent house in Halifax, invisible, untouched, waiting to die tidy? And the answer's no. It's no every time. I bought 2 years of being adored, of being needed, of a doorway full of people singing at me with my name spelled wrong. Some of it was real, and some of it was bought, and I've stopped trying to separate the two because out here, and maybe everywhere, they were never as separate as I thought. Nobody warned me about that. That's the thing. Everyone warns you about the scams, the fake sweethearts, the wired money. Nobody warns you that the danger isn't a villain. It's your own great thawing heart, running ahead of your sense in a place warm enough to melt you. Nobody warned me that being loved and being used could wear the same face and speak in the same soft voice and mean, God help me, a bit of both. I'd still get on the plane. That's my confession, if you want one. Knowing all of it, I'd still get on the plane. I'd just keep one hand on my purse and both eyes open, and I'd remember, this time, that a doorway full of song can be the most expensive thing a lonely woman ever pays for. That was Maureen, 72 years old, from West Yorkshire, who sold a whole life in England and carried her lonely, generous heart to the other side of the world, and found out, the dear and costly way, that the most dangerous thing you can bring to the Philippines isn't your naivety. It's your need to be needed. We tell a lot of these stories on this channel, and most of them are men, and it's easy to watch them and think you'd never be so daft. But listen to what Maureen said, because she said it better than we could. The danger isn't always a villain with a plan. Sometimes it's just poverty on one side and loneliness on the other. and money running downhill between them like water, and a love that's real and unreal at the same time. Nobody in this story is a monster. That's the part that ought to sit with you. It'd be so much easier if somebody were. If you're out there thinking about starting over, later in life, somewhere warm where the people are kind, go, maybe. But go the way Maureen wishes she'd gone. Keep one hand on your purse and both eyes open, and know the difference between being family and being the family fortune. Because out here, they can look exactly alike. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you've a story of your own, man or woman, it makes no difference to us. We'd be honored to hear it. Look after yourselves and look after each other. This has been Inside the Philippines Journals.